Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. It's really good to get the different perspectives on what's happening in the world of greyhound racing at the moment. It sounds like good news today, though. Starting with you, first of all, Mark Bird. You've announced that trials will start from Monday the 18th with a view to racing behind closed doors on June the 1st. I know you've been liaising a lot with government and obviously being steered by them on all this. So what's the latest from your end?
Okay, so you'll have seen the statement that we've put out today saying that we will start racing again along with what government is saying on the 1st of June. For that to happen, obviously there's been lots of dogs that have been sat on their beds for an awful long time, albeit, I would anticipate that trainers have been working them out to get them to where they should be in terms of fitness. So working back from that, we'd already said that the 18th of May would be where we would start to see tracks, probably not all at once, but some of the tracks would start doing trial sessions for dogs to get them ready for racing on the 1st of June.
How do you assess that everything that's happened has affected the different stakeholders, trainers, owners, potential survival of tracks? How good or bad has the impact been?
Well, I think I've grown a beard in the last three weeks or 4 weeks or so. It's been non-stop, if I'm honest. There are different stakeholders involved in the sport. They've all got a say, and they've all got concerns around what's going to happen. I mean, our imperative has always been to get back racing, but we have to do that in the safest possible way. This has been a human crisis that has never been seen before in this country, and let's hope it doesn't happen again. So to prevent a second spike, we've had to provide, as you said, evidence to the government departments, mainly DCMS, that we are in a situation where we can run racing and we can do it safely in a way that protects trainers, owners, stadia staff, and of course the dog. So it's all in the mix, but a number of the stakeholders have been affected in different ways. I do understand that.
How do you personally feel about starting back up racing?
I'd be lying if I said I didn't have some anxiety about it. But it is the best things for the dogs. It's also the best things for people who are involved in sport. People have lost an awful lot of money over time in the short period of time that we have been away. So I think if we can do it safely, and I think we can with the plan that's been put out there. And let me make the point that the plan isn't foolproof. I've picked up on some of the critics around what's going to happen at the pickup and things like that. The 2 weeks we have in which to trial dogs will enable us, I think, to get to a position whereby we've got the right choreography when it comes to racing on the 1st of June and when it's televised. So, yeah, I've got some concerns, but I'm sure there are people out there, including on this call, who've got concerns as well.
Absolutely. I would be included in that for sure. I want to thank Ben Keith for letting us do this interview and Star Sports. I think people will be really pleased to hear from you, Mark, and obviously take the opportunity on behalf of Star Sports to ask you what your thoughts are, if any, on the potential of there being a Greyhound Derby this year.
Well, again, we've had some of the conversations around what's going to happen with open racing. Clearly, we need to get back to graded racing because that's going to be the thing that's going to be bringing in money all the time. But then, of course, we have to look at things like which keep the sport running, which is open racing, and not least the Derby. So there's been some speculation that October's been banded around. I generally don't know about that. We want to get racing started before we can start to look at the availability for the remainder of the year. The one thing we don't want to be doing is running into the back of the Irish Derby. And we'd need to look carefully to see whether or not there's any appetite on there to later. November, December is probably not the best time to run a Derby, but it may be the only available time. And of course, you've mentioned Ben there. Ben's one of the sponsors of the Derby. We've got to make sure that the sponsors want to be running the Derby. I'm sure they will, but it's a question that we've got to work through as well.
It's on the radar by the sounds of it.
Get racing started, everything else will follow.
Mark Wallis, champion trainer, thank you to you as well for joining us. I want to start by asking you how this has impacted on you and your dogs, and most importantly, their welfare. How have they coped without racing?
Well, certainly, for a start, I wouldn't think there's anything that's impacted their welfare. That's always a priority in our kennel, as it is in all other kennels. The fact that we've had an abundance of time to spend with these grounds because we've not been racing. I think, as we've delightfully seen today on our video that Emily has produced, we've produced a video that shows our kennels, our dogs in this lockdown period, and I think it's a very good video that tells you the well-being of our grounds in our care.
Absolutely. And having your page for that video, it's brilliant. Do you have concerns about a return to racing?
I have the same concerns as Mark does. That if we return, it's got to be as safe as possible for all staff members that are travelling to the race courses with the grounds, and that's of key importance. That whatever happens in this crisis, the people's safety comes first. We can pretty much guarantee that the trainers and all the kennel staff are looking after their dogs as well as they can, and hopefully we can turn. You can see that when we turn up at the tracks that the dogs will be in fantastic condition. Yes, they're going to lack us a bit of that race fitness, but most of them will be absolutely raring to go, and we're only going to be giving them hand slip sprints to start with, and it's a bit like a dog being off with an injury for a couple of months. It really doesn't take them that long to pick up where they left off, and that's how I see it.
Dave Clark, thank you for joining us as well. There's been a bigger picture to this, hasn't there? There's been a lot of criticism on social media, which I know you and I both tried to avoid, about returning to racing. And maybe the fact it hasn't happened quicker, or the lack of potential consideration for open racing. But there's a bigger picture here, isn't there? It's a national crisis, and the way I feel about that, and I know you've personally suffered the effects with your family, as have I think, from my point of view, all the right things are being done. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting switch within the sport. I mean, the welfare of the greyhounds has always been paramount, but now there's a real focus on the welfare of those handling and looking after the dogs, as Mark has just mentioned there. I'm sure he'll feel quite strongly about that, given that this is a family operation. He'll be sending, no doubt, members of his family to the track. So the safety of the people looking after the dogs is also, needs to be at the forefront of everyone's thoughts here. And yeah, I suppose it's talking to trainers. There's anxiety about starting up again, but there's also a real will to get the show back on the road. So we'll see.
Jason Gander of Star Sports, desperate to start taking bets again, I'm guessing?
Oh, definitely, yeah. It's been very painful this last couple of months, very slow. We're doing what we can. There's obviously a few sports on still, but I mean, for dogs to restart again, I mean, I just want to get going again. I mean, the 1st of June is fantastic. Obviously, I'm an owner as well, so I've got dogs sitting there waiting to come back, raring to go. I feel for everyone in the sport at the moment, trainers, owners, even bookmakers. I mean, no one's getting anything out of the game, unfortunately, and I understand the situation that's going on. But yeah, it's great that we've got a plan now, and looking forward to get started.
And as you say, you're not just part of Star Sports, you're also a kennel hand and an owner. What would you say is the general vibe amongst owners that you've spoken to? Is there patience and understanding there? Yeah,
definitely. I think most of the owners I've spoken to, they want to help out the trainers. Obviously, they're people with multiple dogs. Usually they don't, if say you've got 5 dogs, you might have a couple off the card injured at any one time, but it's rare to have all 5 off, which they would have had. But it's a situation where owners know that when they buy the dog, there's a chance they could all be off, and they've got to take responsibility for that. Most of them are obviously anxious to get started as soon as possible, but they're understanding of the fact that it needs to be safe to do so.
Mark Bird, how have the GBGB handled social distancing? Are you anybody in the office, or are you Zoom calling meeting like this?
We're probably having more meetings than we've ever had before for a start, because there's been lots of things to debate. There's no one in the office. We have someone goes in probably about once or twice a week to pick up mail, but other than that, we've got a lot of staff that are furloughed. Obviously, all the field staff themselves are working, and they should still be in contact with trainers to make sure everything's going okay. Obviously, we've been making payments to trainers on a monthly basis. So again, it's part and parcel, as I said right at the very start of this. It's not just about making sure that the dog's welfare is okay, but also some of the trainers. We've got an ageing population within greyhound racing, and some of them have been very fearful around this. They'll be fearful, as going back to what Mark Wallis said, they'll be fearful about going back to the track. So again, we're trying to do everything we can to try and keep them up to speed with what's going on, but also to make sure that they're looked after as well.
And you released your 25-page document to explain how social distancing at a track will work. Mark Wallis, I wondered if you have any specific questions for Mark Bird around that, given the fact you will literally be sending your family out, to the track and yourself. Do you have any concerns?
Well, I think we're okay on that front. I mean, I've got some specific questions I would like to ask Mark, and what his brief answers to some things would be. I mean, when Mark, and this is a question to Mark, when he took over the role of leading the GBGB into this, we was promised a new era of progression and transparency, which I think certainly on the welfare side, this is been majorly important, and Mark's done a fantastic job on setting welfare standards that are unprecedented in my time in ground racing, and that's something that we can feel proud of. But when it comes to the responsibilities of decision making, who actually makes these decisions? Certainly with regards to when we come to the open racing, and I'm probably not talking about the last couple of days. I'm talking about when that first page came out, the big statement from the GB. It literally had one line there saying no open racing. I mean, does Mark think that was perhaps a slight mistake on the GBGB's part by not giving open racing a little bit more consideration?
Okay, I hear what you're saying, Mark. Are you talking about when we were still racing behind closed doors and we said no more open racing?
No, I think it's after that, when we announced that there was going to be racing from May the 18th a couple of weeks ago. It was literally just one line on there concerning open racing. I mean, whose decision making was that?
Well, it would have been the board, the Greyhound board themselves. It's gone through a regulatory board, but it's also been the board themselves. And of course, that would have been taken on with regards to advice from veterinary surgeons that were there, but also in relation, most notably from the government themselves, who said about A, there shouldn't be distance travelled, and B, there shouldn't be, other than with a normal population, there shouldn't be cross-contamination from people on there. It
was basically to try and limit the amount of people at the track at one time,
well, not just the amount of people, Mark, but also the people who are normally there versus the people who aren't. So open races, maybe going from 1 or 2 or even 3 tracks throughout a period of time. And it was just that whole, it bumped the risk up. That's the issue.
So something really could have been done to it would have been a help to have that a little bit more clearer when that was decided, So, but moving on from that, if does the GBGB see the benefits and importance of a thriving open race scene, especially as graded racing is really a byproduct of open racing, and the need for breeders to breed Derby type dogs is so very important, and when it comes to consultation about these kind of things, does Mark feel that maybe some people, some other stakeholders could have maybe consulted on before that statement came out?
Well, there was some consultation already done, Mark, but I think there's always going to be more that we can do around that. And I've been talking to owners even today that actually want better representation around that. So I'm very keen coming out from this that we actually start to look at those communication methods anyway. As for stakeholders, I mean, you've got elected stakeholders who are on the board. They've been fully informed as to what's going on, but I think we need to support them more to be able to get those messages out there and also to get those messages back.
Yes, very true. Yes.
I think for open racing is sort of on your radar as being very important for owners that are watching this, Mark.
Yeah, look, they're the lifeblood in many senses in terms of the competitions. Everyone wants that Derby winner, as Mark said there. There's been no intent to sideline open racing. It's just the nature of what that is in the situation that we're currently faced with, although the restrictions are being eased, which is why we will always go back to looking at that document. It's just meant that it didn't make sense from a health and well-being point of view to have open racing continue. That's, as I said, that's been continually looked at, and we'll continue to do so throughout the next few years.
Mark, you've essentially through this been our Bojo. Every time I hear from Boris Johnson, I then wait to hear from Mark Bird to see what's happening. I think there's been some unfair criticism that perhaps things haven't been transparent enough. Do you accept that, or would you challenge that?
We're in a situation of crisis here. So there'll always be people who be sat thinking that we're being clandestine, that we're not telling people what we should be. I mean, just going back to Mark's comments, there's probably more that we could have communicated out in terms of why we took decisions around open racing. But look, we are in a situation where I think we've done better than some other sports in terms of communication, perhaps not as good as some others. I don't ever want us to find ourselves back in the situation, but there are some lessons that we can learn in terms of how we can communicate better moving forward. And we will do that. And I give my undertaking to do that.
And once again, we've got a situation where greyhound racing is going to lead the way. We're going to be back in action from the 1st of June as soon as sport is allowed behind closed doors. So again, we're showing how sort of flexible and adaptable we are as a sport. Dave Clark, is there anything you'd put to Mark?
Yeah, Mark, in your opening statement on this call, you mentioned the word some of the tracks. Is that we're not going to see trials and racing everywhere straight away? And to follow on from that, obviously, prior to the lockdown, betting shops were still a big part of the sport. Is traditionally a betting shop product, albeit there's plenty of streaming and television coverage going on now. Now, the opening of betting shops is going to be quite a long way down the line. I think they come under perhaps leisure classification, so we're quite a long way away from betting shops reopening. Is that going to have an effect on the sport starting up again?
Okay, so let's tackle the first question then, Dave. The question about whether or not all stadia will open and start trialling. We haven't done a straw poll on that yet. It's down to each individual track. Now they've been given the direction as to start racing as to what they do around that. I mean, a good example will be Shawfield, for example. They're not subject to any media deal, as you know, and also they're subject to Scottish law and not English law, and so they haven't given the same relaxing on restrictions. And for that reason, we already know that Shawfield, until they relax everything and they can get people into the stadium, they won't be racing. There's no point. There's no economic benefit for them to be doing that. As I said, other stadia, we wait with bated breath to see whether or not they're going to come online and start trialling from the 18th. Right, I'm just trying to remember the second question now. Betting shops. Yeah, so most of the revenue that comes in through greyhound racing to support the sport comes through licensed betting officers. And as you quite rightly said, Dave, they're not going to open anytime soon. I think the best guess on that is July at the earliest, before we start to see people going into bookies. But obviously what we do hope to see, and there was a little bit of evidence before the shutdown when we were racing behind closed doors, and then we were one of the last, if not the last sport going, was that there would be a bit of a bounce online. And hopefully we can see that again when we start racing again. So yes, it's only going to be revenue coming in on the online basis, but we hope to see A, an increase on that, and B, hopefully more people move towards greyhound racing as a better medium. We won't be back to full financial fitness until such time as the bookmaking offices open as well, though.
Okay, and the final, sorry, Julie, one final question just to raise concerns from trainers that I've spoken to is, have you been in contact with tracks and stadiums about maintenance of their surfaces while in lockdown, and will tracks be bringing back their full track staff once trialling and racing starts? Because obviously there's going to be a hell of a lot of dogs trialling to get back onto the card, so the tracks are going to be quite heavily used.
Yeah, we've been in contact with, through the Stipes, we've been in contact with all of the tracks that are looking to come back to racing. There were some that furloughed their ground staff. My understanding is that all those staff have now been reinstated to get the track in readiness for when trials start again. So, and of course we've got the Services of Sports Turf Research Institute if we need to, because again, in the same way that dogs collectively haven't been laid up for as long as they have, the tracks have not been raced for as long as they have either. So again, we need to make sure that they're ready when the trials start back on the 18th.
Jason Gander, finally, I should give you the opportunity to ask any questions.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just got a couple of things, sort of touching on what Dave said there. Are the tracks under any sort of instruction from yourselves about daily trials? Will it be 2 sessions a day, or is that track dependent?
It's track dependent, Jason. It depends. Also, I mean, obviously trials historically would be before or after racing. So again, to limit the amount of people that are at the track at any one time, I anticipate that most of the tracks will start to stagger trainers bringing their dogs. Trainers will obviously be trialing their dogs in as much as possible separately from other trainers, so that again we limit that potential for exposure. But it is for the tracks to manage. We will be overseeing that through our stipendiary staff.
Okay, yeah, and just lastly, the schedule that we've missed. I mean, I'm not sure what competitions have been lost. Are they being lost? Are we moving forward with them? Are we looking at the schedule sort of week by week, month by month now, or is it just going to be a wait and see?
No, I think once we get racing back underway, and it doesn't look like there's going to be a second spike or anything like that, we will already be working around what the schedule looks like. So yes, we've missed some competitions. That doesn't necessarily mean that they fall by the wayside, and obviously we've already spoken about the Derby. But again, as much as the imperative is getting back to racing, a close second to that will be trying to look at the open racing schedule to get that back.
Okay.
And Mark, just my final question to you. I think when this lockdown started and coronavirus started, we all kind of feared the worst a little bit for greyhound racing. It's not a sport that has a lot of money behind it, but now we're starting to come out of it. I'm sure your funds are slightly depleted, but are we in okay shape?
Yeah, we're ready. We are ready to get back racing again. And yes, you're right. We have raided the coffers, and some of that raiding was on key projects that we wanted to go ahead. But we're not unique. You know, other sports are in tatters. If I'm honest, I think we're in better shape, and I'm grateful for all those people who are involved in the sport, not least the trainers and their dogs and their owners, who've kept motivation going. We've had no one turn around and pack up, as far as I'm aware, as a result of this. So we are all good to go.
Excellent.
On the subject of, Jules, if I could mention it, on the subject of owners, do you think would Mark agree that once we do get back to a sense of normality, we could look back at some of these things here and try and improve some things? The communication between the GBGB and owners has been particularly criticised, and maybe there's the chance to use the set of skills of we've got some leading owners there, the business skills and acumen skills that they've got. Maybe try and produce a bit more of a commercial arm to the GBGB to help promote the sport a bit better. These are the things that seem to crop up time and time again. And would Mark agree that when we do return and get to some normality, that improvements in these can be vastly done?
Well, first and foremost, I think, as I already said to you, Mark, I think that the communication side is something that we need to look at, most especially around owners. And that includes with the stakeholder who's on the board, giving him better support so that he can both speak with and be spoken to by owners. In terms of the commercial side, I mean, there's lots of people throughout the whole of the sport who've got great skill sets. And one of the things I was talking to an owner about today was, if you can recall, when Paul Efferson was in the chair, he had his innovation panel, which was just made up of owners, but we could include trainers and things like that to try and get a better idea of what's going on. Unfortunately, the moment the coronavirus hit, we were shortlisted commercial directors for the board. And the idea is that we buy in that executive so that we start looking at the commercial side of it, we start looking at sponsorship, and we start looking at how we can grow the sport as well. And it was only because of the coronavirus that we weren't able to fulfil that. So it's, again, very shortly we'll be hoping to go through that stage again and appoint someone onto the board who's working with the Greyhound board as a commercial director. There's lots of opportunities.
Do you feel, Mark, that when we do come back to normality, we could have a look at some of the things that in this time of these extraordinary times, some of the owners have had a chance to sit back and I wouldn't say they've been totally critical. Some of their stuff has been more what's the word? Bit more thoughtful and
constructive.
Constructive. That was the word I was looking for. Perhaps you know, the GBGB will get a chance to say, you know, look, we had a lot of feedback from owners, and you know, and I'm talking on an owner side, and again, like I'm like most trainers, you know, I own about 25% of my kennel. As well, sort of thing, and you know, from an owner's side, I think there could be the chance for the GB to reset, to press the reset button, and take some opportunities that are perhaps there in front of them to improve. You know, the sport's all about owners. It can only survive with owners. If we have to survive just on, although it's most important, of course, the bookmakers' money, and forget about the fact that this is a sport that has a history, and the history goes back to owners who own great dogs, and it's what defines our sport and everything. If we go down that route of just being totally bookmaker dominated, we're losing that aspect of it even more. So there's certainly the case can be made that you know, things could be improved on ownership side more than anything.
Okay, so in answering that, I think if anyone, not least the ground board, but also the people involved in the sport, don't reflect on where we've been over the last few weeks and see some opportunities out of that, then I think that would be somewhat foolhardy. So from my point of view, yes, there will be lessons to be learned from this. Yes, there will be more opportunities to engage with people more. And yes, there will be that opportunity to try and grow the sport. I mean, I think we've put ourselves in a very good place. From when we finished racing, because we were the last show in town, as I keep banging on about, but also the opportunity to seize initiative and get back into it again. But we need to learn from what wasn't working right beforehand, and that includes obviously communication with owners.
And far from being critical,
if that's okay, guys. But as you say, Mark, fingers crossed, opportunities lie ahead, and that will start with the return to racing on the 1st of June. People at home, hopefully bored, will connect with our sport, and we can maybe see that as an opportunity. Thank you so much to you all for joining us. Glad to see you all healthy and well, and I hope it stays that way, and good luck to all of you with the return to racing.
Cheers, George.
Thanks so much.